Welcome to the Nearshore Cafe podcast, home to the most interesting stories and people doing business in Latin America.
Welcome, everyone, to the Nearshore Cafe podcast, sponsored by Plugg Technologies. My name is Brian Samson. I'm one of your co-hosts here today, eight-year founder of Nearshore LATAM-based companies. Along with me is my co-host, Kent Cameron, a digital nomad currently living in LATAM, and we are super excited to be here.
Super excited, looking forward to diving in. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right. Well, Kent, you have a really interesting story, and I really want our listeners and viewers to understand, like, just what does it mean to be a digital nomad in Latin America, and how you got into this world and all that stuff. But I think what would be really interesting is if we can kind of plant where you are today. So, like, where are you living? What's daily life like? You know, it looks like you're in a pretty cool modern background. Yeah, tell us a little more about daily life.
So yeah, no, it's great. I'd love to share that with you, Brian. Yeah, so right now, I'm based in a place which is in southern Colombia called Cali.
Okay. Cali. Okay.
Yeah, Cali.
C-A-L-I, right?
C-A-L-I. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Right. Yeah.
So I'm based in Cali, and it's known as the salsa capital of the world. And I don't, like, to be brutally honest with you, I don't know if that's like 100% legit. But it's definitely something that the culture here is based on, and it's like a big thing. So the culture passes down, generation to generation, and all that sort of stuff. So you can't deny that it's pretty popular here. So so salsa is a big thing in this town. It's probably the third largest city in Colombia. So I actually moved down here about 8 or 9 months ago.
Okay.
But interesting stories behind that, because I've been coming here for a long time. Because you may or may not have been to Colombia, but in Colombia it's very culturally rich, like up to the eyeballs sort of thing. There's so many things to do, and this is one of the things I discovered on my journey. Funny story is my parents actually were like professional dancers. They met each other, and that's how they met. And so essentially, like, I didn't know that, like, I actually got into this. Like, it wasn't necessarily my thing, right? I didn't know I liked this, but somehow it's in my blood, I think. So yeah.
That's great. And so you said Cali's in the southern part of Colombia. Like, what's the weather like out there?
Great question. Yeah, so it's super hot here. So what I love about it is that it's really predictable. So it's hot all year round. And me being from, like, from Australia, there's pretty good weather there in the north. So it's sort of just been a natural transition for me.
Yeah, right on. And so you said it's the third biggest city. Tell us a little more about, like, kind of daily life there, and, like, are people going to the markets all day, and, like, the food and the culture, the coffee culture, Nearshore Cafe, we love our coffee here.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think like, day in a life here, it's kind of interesting. It can be a little chaotic, obviously, but it's also I would say kind of like a destination. You don't really go for coffee. Like, the altitude isn't really prime for that, so like, it's dry and hot. But there's lots of like, trees, and it's very, like, sort of nature based. Most of Colombia is pretty diverse. But yeah, so I would say, like, people drink a lot of coffee, but we don't produce a lot of coffee here. But there are lots of farms that they produce lots of other things. Don't quote me exactly on what they do, but there's a ton of different things they produce, and agriculture's, it's a big thing. So yeah, like, so as you maybe could imagine, if you you've been to Latin America, right? So you've been and you've seen like markets and all that sort of stuff. There's definitely like a really vibrant like sort of culture where you can go and buy anything really cheap. Fruits, there's like crazy amount of fruits and different vegetables. Like as I mentioned, it's quite diverse. So it depends on what location depending on what you're going to get. So yeah, very interesting, dynamic, kind of diverse place.
What are the typical people eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner out there?
Yeah, so yeah, again, it's kind of specific. So, but also there seems to be the same thing. So, like in the morning, most people have like arepas and they have like avocado and they'll have some meat or something like that. It's very, very common. Eggs as well, you know, that sort of thing. Like it's a combination, fairly hearty sort of food. You know, lots of soups and different sort of like food like that. Sorry, I can't say all the names of the food.
Yeah, that's
You put me on the spot here.
okay. And is rice and beans, is that a staple, or is there like certain meat that's more commonly used than others?
Okay, so meat, yeah, I think like chicken and res, like kind of like steak or beef, is like a staple. Yeah, like in every meal you get that. Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
right on. And now we know that you're a digital nomad, which is uh something that has, like you said, has really become popular about a decade ago, and especially, driven by COVID. For those that don't know, I live in Hawaii, and there's been a lot more digital nomads that live here too, where as long as you have internet and a laptop, we can all make it work. Um, just kind of how is the infrastructure out there? Internet and phone service and technology, and are there other people like you? Are there other nomads, digital nomads in Cali?
Yeah. So yeah, I can talk about that. So over the years, I've been sort of going in and out of Colombia for the last 5 years, seeing like the infrastructure really change and become a lot more robust. You know, post-COVID is a great reason. And also, I think, I don't know if you've seen like Starlink, I think is also available here as well. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, like internet's not really an issue. You know, and so really fast internet, readily available. So yeah, so in terms of foreigners, so it's a real popular place. Lots of people, you know, travel all over the world here, including, you know, a lot of people from America. There's lots of people from America, interestingly enough. So yeah, so it's a really popular touristy kind of place to come. I think like the salsa is a key thing that like drives people down here. They come down, you know, and they want to go to all the good clubs, and you know they want to try all the different things, and so yeah, it's a really unique place for that reason.
Right on. Now, have you partaken in the salsa culture?
Yeah. I try. Yeah, like, you know, the weekend is a great opportunity, you know, to get out and do that. You know, obviously you need to be kind of disciplined because like the culture here, you know, it's very collective. People want to share their culture. It's you know, something they're very proud about, and I think like they have every right to be, right, but also, you know, sometimes when you're juggling like work and also like seeing a country and all that sort of stuff, you need to be sort of disciplined about it, right? Otherwise you could be dancing all night, you know. So you know, that's just my 10 cents. Yeah. So the weekends, it's pretty common to go out with friends and just like go and casually dance at various like clubs and you know, bars and things like that. It's super like very, very friendly for anyone coming all over the world. You'll find that there's like a very easy transition here for sure.
Yeah, it seems like a very welcoming place. And just kind of back to the digital nomad environment, like
Yeah.
are there startups here? Like are there co-working spaces? Like how do you guys meet each other and find each other out there?
I think the most common go-to point is like a WeWork. They're all over the world. You're familiar with those, right?
Of course, yeah.
So yeah, so there's several locations here where you can plug and play, and it's pretty economical. And yeah, like I think the other go-to, which I'm a fan of, is just going to like various online Facebook groups and things, and that seems to be the easiest thing. Like sometimes you might be in different places, and like sometimes a drama to get around at times. So
Yeah.
busy, all those things. Yeah, so there's plenty of room to meet people. There's like this thing I noticed the other night. I went past, I haven't been, but there's like, they call it like a gringos, like language night, Spanish night or something like that. And it's it's one of those classic things. So there's a lot of those sorts of initiatives. So if you came down, anytime, you're more than welcome. You could essentially go and learn Spanish, pretty quickly.
Right
How's
on.
it, how's your Spanish, by the way? Sorry to break your flow, but how's your Spanish?
Interestingly enough, my Spanish has been pretty stagnant since I became a nearshore entrepreneur, for the very reason that everyone that I interact with, their English level is so high that like there's really I just kind of throw in some Spanish words I think for fun, but otherwise the population that I work with, the English is so abundant, fluency is so advanced that all my conversations are just easily in English, and it's just super unscripted and just casual, which is something that really attracted me to the region.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of elusive, right? Like you need to use it, or you lose it, sort of thing. So yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it's no easy feat either. The Spanish language, if you didn't learn when you were at school or something like that. So yeah, so it's a good one, that one.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little more about, as a digital nomad, that's a pretty vague thing, but like, what do you do day to day? Like, what do you do for work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like the whole digital nomad thing, it's like there's many different like variations and sort of like models, I think, like of how you can work. And it could be anything from you could be freelancer, you could be like remote employment's another one. You could be like entrepreneurship's an obvious one. You could be like a content producer. Maybe you're an investor, like in the finance side of things. So there's a ton of different ways, and I guess my sort of categorization of it was, I took like the entrepreneurship route and also the freelancing route. Seemed to be the right one for me. And I probably didn't anticipate as many like learning curves. So there's a ton of stuff I didn't know before I left, and now I know. So that was really cool. And like just really like the main thing I do is I played with coding. I played with like recruiting, teaching. I've done a number of things, and that seemed to have got me across the line.
Yeah. And recruiting and coding, are two often in-demand skill sets, and I'd imagine the cost of living in Cali is a little bit less than the cost if you were to move to the US.
It's a great point. Yeah, I've had this question so many times. So yeah, Brian, I think the motivation for me to originally go was that I was trying to fix that overhead like cost problem. So it's like sort of you want to minimize your overheads, maximize your income. So I was thinking in the same vein. Yeah, it was like I was thinking in terms of options. Like, before I left, it was like, do I live with my parents? Do I stay in the job and do like a side hustle thing? Do I raise money, or what do I do next? And so it kind of came to a point where I was like, I need a fourth option.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it was sort of like, I need another option because neither of those appealed to me at all. And I was like, okay, what is that option? And I came up with like South America, starting in Mexico. Because because I guess like just to share with you, I think if you look at the problem statement, it's like trying to minimize your overheads. Mexico automatically is, very different in terms of like sort of purchasing power when it comes to like Australia versus Mexico, or Sydney versus like say the beaches in Mexico. It's a very different thing. So achieve that goal. And then the other one I liked was it was on the same time zone as the US. So I could like effectively access like this massive market, right? So I looked at it and I thought, well, this is like classic arbitrage. Like it's almost like I checked up the actual like term. It's called currency arbitrage, or forex arbitrage. Is that right? Yeah, and so that was the initial incentive, and it seemed to work. 5 years later, I'm here, so I guess it worked. But so that was the appeal to get started.
Yeah, I also think it can make someone like you incredibly attractive for companies, looking for that talent arbitrage, because here you've got a digital nomad with skills that easily adapt to the Western world, because that's where you're from, because your overhead is just a fraction of what your competition in the US, your overhead is a fraction of that cost. So it allows you to still make a massive margin, but also price your own personal services more competitively. And I think that you've really cracked the code. You really cracked the system on that. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I'm getting there. I didn't. Well, yeah, I did. I think like I got some things in retrospect straight away. Like you obviously get by default a cheaper environment in that sense, or a less cost. And then the other things, like it was fraught with plenty of challenges I can share with you, and takeaways. But it's like, that it's sort of a journey, and you get certain things up front and other things later on. So yeah, that was generally the cadence of it all. So
yeah, cool. Forgive me, we haven't really spent much time on your overall backstory, Kent. Obviously you're an Aussie. Tell us, just kind of tell us a little more about like growing up, and how you I know you talked about the fourth option, but just kind of tell us a little more about Kent growing up, Kent in high school, and like your journey to this exciting continent.
Awesome question. Yeah, thanks for asking. I guess so yeah, Aussie, born and raised in a place called Brisbane, out in the country in between, like it's a place called Ferny Hills. So went there, was classically educated, went through all that. Very entrepreneurial family. So it was like, sitting there watching, dad like in the pool room downstairs, build a point of sale service business, and that led on to a number of international companies, which was interesting. And so I spent a lot of my time just like sort of arguing with my parents about business decisions at a dinner table, and building prototypes of things. So that was kind of my background, fairly creative, practical. And then so like first overseas trip out of Australia, I was always seeking diversity. I think it came from one of the schools I went to. It was super diverse, and I was like, wow, like let's get out and see what's going on. Like I guess like, sorry, just touching on school. Definitely always in trouble. Great at doing always looking for a response, like pretty much, so bit of a character. Definitely played a lot of sport, quite athletic career, basically like tons of those normal things. But yeah, so my first like trip was to London. So I went to Europe and did the Europe side of things. And yeah, like my career sort of like bloomed getting into sort of like IT recruitment, property development, accounting. I did a whole different heap of different disciplines, and then landed on technology, and then sort of 20 years later, here I am. So yeah, that's the story.
Well, talk a little about like what you expected when you came to Latin America, if anything, right? Like it's, kind of hard to anticipate. And then, what surprised you in a good way? What surprised you in a not so good way? Tell us some more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess there's a couple of things that really stand out. So I'll probably start by talking about Spanish. Maybe that's a good one. We kind of touched on that. So my interpretation was that, you go online and you can learn Spanish in a month, like no problem, done. Like, thanks for coming, right? So that was the biggest misconception. I never knew any Spanish. Like growing up, I learned some German, and English obviously was the dominant language. So like I really didn't know any Spanish at all. So okay, I spent about a month and became conversationally fluent. Like I think it's easy to, have a conversation, people can understand, but then like I bumped into like, all sorts of challenges, which were much more, much more difficult to communicate through. And I realized soon that I really didn't know anything, and that the learning curve and the type of learning curves in Latin America for me were getting my head across that language to the level that I needed. Because like I love getting on the road, I love getting out and about, and I needed a lot more. A lot of people here speak English, so it's super like widely acceptable to speak in English to some extent in major cities. But when you go off the beaten track, it's a different story. When you work, it's a different story. So that's like the first thing. So learning Spanish after going to universities here, working in the workplace, dealing with, like meeting friends and having social situations, and, even some working contexts, like, like I realized that, it was a big journey, and it's still ongoing. I think I'm like at nearly a high, like B1 or maybe B2 level in university standards. Like you can get away with it now. I can get away with it better now than I did back then. But so that was the first one. Okay, might lean on this. So major world events. So when you're traveling and you're, nomadic, essentially, it's like if there's a major change in the world, that can be challenging on a local basis, like, when you're at home. But when you're away, I found like that was kind of interesting. So that was something I didn't expect, was just, any major world changes or world events. That was interesting. And I'd say also like migration to some extent. So systems are a little slower. You need a little bit of help. Those things are really important. So that was a little challenging. So I was expecting, it's going to be different, but I could just slot in. But it was much longer kind of like timeline. So what else? Just also learning new skills. So you think sometimes that, say, a skill translates like in your local market to, say, another market. And I had to learn like the whole US market, and understand exactly, what was needed, and also where I could work. Like sometimes there'll be companies that will say, oh, look, we're hiring remote, but that's remote in US, and they may not be necessarily open. So like you have to figure out your like kind of framework for that, which is an art form for sure.
To jump on that for a second, so obviously you've worked with some US companies. How did they pay you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things, because I'm an Australian resident, so the interesting thing is I found like there was companies that were open to paying me as like essentially as an AKA kind of like contractor to some extent, but not a locally based contractor, like a contractor who would help them out, and consult on whatever it was. And then it'd be a month by month basis, and there's a ton of companies that will do that. So it was interesting to explore that, because again, the goal was to have some form of like arbitrage around the earnings, right? So get some US dollars and live in a location which is like obviously not as expensive, and go from there. So yeah, there's actually like quite a lot of companies who are open to that. But you have to like definitely search. It's not like a straightforward, hey, everyone's putting their hands up. So you have to go and have those conversations. Yeah, but that's sort of how it works. So like there's a number of like options out there. So there's like payment platforms which are really useful, really easy to use. You can sort of like just set up an account and they'll utilize your bank account back in whatever location you are originally based in.
Could
So
you
like,
share, for those that are interested, could you share a couple of those companies?
yeah, so the first two that I've had experience with was with Payoneer, and so go to payoneer.com, I believe, and also Deal, deal.com, I believe, if you're familiar.
Two E's deal.com.
Yeah. They're two that I've used. By the way, there's many others. But they're the two that I actually have experience with and found them to be quite good and effective in terms of getting paid from a international company to a local bank account. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right on. And then I want to go personal for a sec, because you I know you as a cyclist. Talk about cycling around Colombia and elsewhere that you've been in Latin America.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. Yeah, I think like this is one of my favorite topics, and I guess yeah, like I've always been a cyclist, and it's one of the reasons why Colombia worked as a location for me. Like if you haven't noticed, there's like some pretty big hills. It's pretty diverse. So they produce like a number of really competitive cyclists in like the Tour de France. You'll see, taking out a couple of like places that, a couple of competitions. So yeah, so basically it's like a religion here. And I've had a number of experiences, but probably the two that sort of stick out to me is so I was living in near Medellín. It's like the second largest city, the city of the spring, they call it. And I was living in a place called Rio Negro. It was near the airport. I don't know if have you been to Medellín or
I have
Colombia?
not, but that is high up on my list, and I was just writing about that the other day. The city of eternal spring, like the climate just sounds perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. So just imagine like every single day you get up and it's spring every single day. There's technically there's two seasons in Colombia. One is rain, one is summer. So that's kind of it. So yeah, so in this place called Rio Negro, which is near the airport, when you enter Medellín, there's basically like a ton of opportunities to join groups and ride. And it's very like sort of affluent area. And there's all these like little small nooks and crannies, like little pueblos and towns, and there's all these amazing hills, and there's all these places to go. So like you're never short of a challenge, and long rides. Like you could ride like 120 Ks with a group, and that's a standard thing. Like they cycle pretty hard here. But there's many other places to go. The other one I would recommend is I went to a ride which is about roughly 100 to 120 K uphill. So it takes all day to do. Obviously, and it's called Letras de Autos, I believe. You have to excuse my accent, but yeah, like basically that is an opportunity where you can ride all day, every day if you want to do that, Brian. So if you choose.
Years ago, I think I was pretty into cycling, nowhere near the level you were, but I did most of my cycling in Southern California with a big reason of predictable weather, right? Like for about 8 months a year, I didn't have to worry about getting downpoured on or anything. And it sounds like that's a benefit of cycling in Colombia, is you're probably not going to get downpoured on in the non-rainy season.
Depending on the location, but yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, it's a little bit more predictable. So yeah, so lots of cycling in Colombia, lots of opportunity to be active. You know, nature cycling seems to be like a massive thing. So yeah, like you know, I've had plenty of punctured tires out in the middle of nowhere. You know, like the roads actually, depending on location. So like maybe talking about infrastructure and like Rio Negro and Medellín area is probably the best, I'd say, out of you know, basically most towns and cities. So you can have pretty smooth like sort of ride, and people know and respect cyclists. You know, they're fully aware of them, and you know, so you can definitely you can ride quite safely, and it's a great activity. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So Kent, tell us a little more about daily life in Colombia and Cali. You know, what's that look like for you?
Yeah, so generally I try to keep things simple. Okay, that's like a rule, I think, over time. I try to keep things simple. So one part of it is like, okay, you work as a digital nomad. You're like, I you know, I work with like the New York time zone. You know, so like, you know, you assume that it's basically same time zone. So you got your daily work, right? So I'll be you know, definitely respectful of that and protect that, because you know you've got lots of distractions, you know, so there's lots of great things to do. So I think like the morning for me, I try and get up like really early. I'd probably be like, unashamedly to say, about 4 a.m. I get up, and I'm one of those guys.
Early riser, yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way I work, and I shoot off, you know, with the team, and hit some slopes, like in terms of cycling, you know, hit the hills, I should say, and then you know, come back. We'll have coffee, breakfast, socialize, same sort of thing. It kind of reminds me of Brisbane when I used to cycle with my buddies there. So basically, like it's the same sort of thing. It's just it's a different world though, in the same vein. So yeah, so we'd be like try and dodge some potholes, you know, early in the morning. You know, get a good ride in, usually about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on that. So get back, probably rehydrate, more coffee, obviously. Big fan of the coffee. And then I'll probably just get straight into work, and you know, like I've got meetings, and I've got to like basically get there. Fairly straightforward and somewhat boring, actually. Like, you know, like you've got to be somewhat boring to get things done. But then you also got to have your fun time. Like, so, you know, when nighttime comes, you've got opportunities to go out and do things, especially the weekend. Usually the week I'm fairly reserved. On the weekend, it's pretty common for me to jet somewhere, or just get in a bus and go and see somewhere local. You know, so that's like sort of generally the things I do. I think one of the things that's different in terms of my lifestyle compared to living in Medellin versus living in Cali, for example, is that down here it's like obviously different style of music. So in Medellin you have like reggaeton. It's a like capital for that, and down here it's like basically like a capital for salsa, and it's a capital for you know, like nightlife and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little different, but you know, just different culture, different things to do. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, I like it. That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing. So I want to close out our podcast today with 3 hard-hitting questions, I guess you could say. So the first one is, what is your favorite Spanish word?
Okay. Fuerte, strong.
I like it. I like it. Good. So Kent, being that you've been a digital nomad, remind me, for how many years now you've been in LATAM?
I think it's approaching 5. I think it's approaching
5 years. 5 years. So you are the veteran of digital nomad in being a digital nomad in LATAM. So for those that are considering, like, hey, that sounds really cool what Kent's doing, I might want to do that. What is your number one piece of advice for those, say, in Australia or America or Europe that are considering following in your path, in your footsteps, and moving to Latin America?
I think like the best piece of advice is, I think, be self-aware to deal with distractions, and I think if discipline's your thing, you'll find that that's probably going to serve you pretty well here.
Good advice. Good advice. And my last question for you, Kent, is tell us about the best purchase you've made in Colombia under $50 US.
It's a great question. I think it's a hard one to answer as well, right? And I think that everything's so cheap here.
Yeah.
Like, for example, let's take like eggs and breakfast or something, right? And a coffee. Like, I would be hard pressed to spend more than like $1 US on that.
Oh my God.
I'm like, depending on the location. Yeah, so yeah, that would probably, like, breakfast here is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that sounds great. I love it. So Kent, the background looks quite cool, by the way. Looks like a pretty modern building. Tell us about, where you're living exactly, like, what kind of building it is, and, so forth.
Yeah. So quite fortunate. I live in these as you can see, fairly modern apartment. So this apartment is, like, I think it's only like 5 years old or something like that. And I'm in south side of the city. And basically, like this building here is like, I do a lot of my work from here. Just out of choice, because it's like, I get so much for my dollar here. I can pretty much have anything I want. On the roof there's a pool and a deck. It's like massive pool and deck. So like, it's a really modern building. There's I've got a gym inside my apartment, and also there's a gym on the other side of the road. Then there's, like, a whole heap of parks and, kind of wildlife and everything, but it's just super close to, like, restaurants and cafes, and it's like everything that I would have in Brisbane, but just Colombian, if that makes sense. So, like, yeah, it's this whole place, it's all great internet, great air conditioning, great everything. So yeah, I'm pretty fortunate.
Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Ken, this has been a blast. Super fun. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about you. I learned a lot about Cali, Colombia. So just a whole lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to doing more of these, and thankful for our sponsor, Plugg Technologies, for producing this for us. And I'll see you again soon.
See you again soon, Brian. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for joining us at the Nearshore Cafe podcast. Tune in next week for a new episode featuring another special guest with exciting stories.